Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the overnight hours of January 29th, 2026. And the United States is, well, it's being pushed right to the edge. A perfect storm of crises. Social, natural, and criminal, all erupted at once, across the entire country. And in this breakdown, we're going to dig into what happened and why it really matters. So, what actually happened on this single chaotic night across America? We're going to explore three major crises that were all unfolding at the same time: widespread civil unrest, a really devastating natural disaster, and a surge in urban violence. Honestly, any one of these would be a massive story on its own, but together, they created a true national emergency. So, to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to look at it from three different angles. First, the protests that just swept the nation. Then, the deadly winter storm that was paralyzing entire regions. And finally, the wave of violence that stretched emergency services to their absolute breaking point. Let's start with the event that really lit the fuse. All right, so the first thread in this whole tapestry of chaos was the explosion of protests across the country. And this wasn't just some spontaneous eruption of anger, no. It was more like a powder keg that was just waiting for a spark. And that spark? It was the death of one person, Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old ICU nurse and a U.S. citizen. You know, when people heard his story, a caregiver, a citizen, a victim, it just struck a major nerve. His death quickly became a symbol for a system that a lot of people felt was completely broken. And look at how fast this all happened. It's incredible. On January 24th, Pretty was killed in Minneapolis. Just a few days later, by the night of the 28th, that outrage had reached a boiling point, and the streets just erupted in protest. Now, the two biggest hotspots were Minneapolis and New York City. In Minneapolis, the response was really swift and forceful. You had state troopers come in, declare an unlawful assembly, and make a bunch of arrests. In New York, protesters used a totally different tactic, occupying a hotel lobby. That led to a standoff that ended with up to 70 people being detained. Okay, so as if all that wasn't enough, at the exact same time, this massive, deadly winter storm was tearing across the country. This wasn't some separate story happening on the side. It was a second front in this nationwide crisis, just compounding the chaos and straining resources even more. And just look at this number, 108. That's the number of confirmed fatalities across the United States and Canada from this storm. That number alone just tells you about the immense power and the destructive force of this weather event. It's a staggering human cost. And you can see here, this wasn't just a storm in one spot. It was everywhere. New York, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, all of them hitting double-digit death tolls. It just gives you a sense of the vast and deadly reach of this thing. And the ways people died were just tragic. I mean, we're talking about hypothermia, heart attacks from simply trying to shovel snow, crashes on icy roads. But the danger didn't even stop when the snow did. You had ongoing threats from things like carbon monoxide poisoning and, critically, hundreds of thousands of people left without power in the freezing cold. So you've got the protests, you've got the storm. Emergency services are already stretched thin, right? Well, a third crisis was brewing in cities all over, a spike in urban violence that was about to stretch those resources to the absolute breaking point. The gun violence that night was particularly alarming. In Chicago, you had multiple shootings reported, including one where a 71-year-old woman was injured. And then in St. Louis, get this, a funeral was interrupted by gunfire. A shocking act of violence that left several people hurt and really highlights the unpredictable nature of what was happening. And this wasn't just a Chicago or St. Louis problem. No way. You started to see this disturbing pattern pop up all over the country. A fatal shooting in Virginia, a crazy high number of shots fired calls in Portland, and even more violence in cities that were already grappling with everything else. The system was clearly just getting overloaded. And this brings us to the key concept here: strained resources. Think about it. You have police tied up at protests, you have rescue crews responding to the storm, and now you have a surge in violence and fires. There just weren't enough first responders to be everywhere at once. The entire system was stretched to its absolute limit. And it wasn't just the police who were overwhelmed. Fire departments were getting absolutely slammed too. We're talking a major apartment fire in Seattle, a fatal explosion in a high-rise in Yonkers, multiple fires burning in Los Angeles, even a really challenging house fire in rural Oregon. The entire emergency response network was under immense pressure.
Okay, so we've looked at the protests, the storm, and the violence. Now let's just take a step back and connect the dots. What is the big picture here?
This quote really sums it all up perfectly. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything, all at once. A perfect storm of social unrest, natural disaster, and urban violence that created this intense pressure cooker environment across the entire country. So, we're left with this crucial question, aren't we? Was this a once-in-a-generation perfect storm, just a chaotic fluke? Or was it a chilling preview of a new, more volatile reality? The answer to that question might just determine the future of a nation already on the edge. Thanks for tuning in.